Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Books and Books in Coral Gables. Thank you all for coming down for this very special event. As you can see from these lights and these cameras, we're live streaming the event tonight on the internet. So a note to our internet audience at home, if at any time during the presentation you'd like to purchase a copy of the book, just call the number on your screen. We'll take care of that for you. We'll have the governor sign it, and we will ship it to you wherever you are in the U.S. free of charge. Also, during the question and answer period, if you have a question for the governor, go ahead and get that to us, and I'll try to ask him for you during the Q&A. Well, this evening, Books and Books is very proud to present Governor Charlie Crist and his new book, The Party's Over: How the Extreme Right Hijacked the GOP and I Became a Democrat. As you all know, Charlie Crist is the former Republican governor of Florida. After running for the U.S. Senate as an independent in 2010, he began working with the Democratic Party, and in 2012 he became a member. In this book, Governor Crist offers a focused indictment of the failings of the Republican Party, naming names and identifying where things went wrong. He explains why he believes that Democrats have the right vision for Florida and the nation, what he's learned as a member of both parties, and why he remains convinced that the two-party system can still work with the right leadership. Please give a very warm welcome to the Honorable Charlie Crist.
Thank you. Is this your phone? Do you want that? Anybody lose a phone? Oh, of course. Forgive me. Perdoname. I'm sorry. It's an honor to be here, and a privilege. Books and Books is one of the coolest bookstores I've ever been in. So thank you so much for having us, and really appreciate the opportunity to come here and do a book signing. I have some wonderful friends here, and I want to thank you personally for taking the time to come by tonight. It means a lot. And this was a fun book to write. I really enjoyed it. And I wrote it with a great guy named Ellis Hennigan, who also writes for Newsday. And he's just a talented, gifted, honest person. And the book is basically to tell, Andy, why I went from Republican to Independent to Democrat. Frankly, they went crazy, and so here we are. But not to be trite, the leadership of the Republican Party really is where it was. And there's plenty of good Republicans. My mom and dad are Republican, for example. But I think that the leadership of the party really was hijacked by the Tea Party. And I saw it start happening when I was running for the U.S. Senate. And it was amazing to me to witness it, and for Carol and I to kind of live through it. I went down to Fort Myers, Florida, Herman, in 2009, in February. The president's office, I was still governor at the time, and the president's office, the new president, President Obama, called our staff in Tallahassee and said that he wanted to come to Fort Myers, Florida. And the point that he wanted to make about being there was that this is where the mortgage crisis was the worst in that. And it was just, it was a nightmare. I mean, if you think back to 2008, the end of 2008, beginning of 2009, it's really when this global economic meltdown was at its highest pitch. And it was frightening. John, thank you for coming. I mean, that's John Rivera. He is a dear friend and head of the PBA here in Miami-Dade County. And he and his colleagues are the kind of people who literally are willing to risk their lives to help us be safe and free. And so please give them a round of applause. That's why we got to protect your pension. Kind of an issue that's floating around Tallahassee, and I don't understand why people like you aren't appreciated even more, the way our school teachers ought to be appreciated even more, in education, in our environment, ethics. Anyway, don't get me started on that. We've got 8 months to talk about that, and we sure as hell will. But anyway, I accepted the invitation to go and be with President Obama, Dan, and was honored to be there. He came down to talk about the Recovery Act, or the stimulus as it's sort of commonly known. And I remember, though, backing up a little bit if I could with you, I got married on December 12th, 2008 to Carol. She is the light of my life. And so we're on our honeymoon in Yusupa Island over near Fort Myers. And this economic meltdown is going on, and it's, you don't know what's going to happen to your 401k, your IRA, your stock, your investments. I mean, rumors were that Chrysler was going out of business. I guess it almost did. It was a frightening time if you think back to that time in our economic history. And a lot of people, went under. A lot. A lot of Floridians were really hurting. And what was affecting state government at the time, Mark, is the fact that revenues really sank. And I was thinking over the holidays, how in the world are we going to make ends meet? I mean, as Andy and Herman and some of the fine lawyers and Mark knows, we have to balance our budget by the Constitution in Florida. And I was worried about it. And I remember going back to Tallahassee after the holidays were over, and I met with a guy named Jerry McDaniel. He was my budget director when I was governor before. And I asked Jerry, I said, how in the world are we going to put together a budget to present to the legislature that is in balance when our revenues have fallen off so badly? And he said, well, the president has a plan. And I said, he does? I'm all ears. Tell me about it. And he said, well, he thinks that we ought to invest in the states. And he calls it the Recovery Act. And it will pay for our teachers and our firefighters and our law enforcement officers. And the idea is to be a bridge to get us through this difficult time and to hopefully a brighter future when the economy starts to turn around again. And I said, that's fabulous. God bless this man. Because I'm thinking as your governor, how in the world are we going to do this? And one guy in Washington, D.C. really reached out his hand to us and said, I want to help you. And it was hard to convince Congress to do it. And so I remember Governor Doyle from Wisconsin had called me and he said, would you be willing to call some of your then fellow Republicans in the Senate and try to convince them to vote for it and help the president provide this for Florida and the other states? And I said, absolutely. And so I did. And anyway, so my staff comes into me and says, look, the president's going to be in Fort Myers. He'd like you to come and be with him when he's there. Are you interested? I said, sure. I'd be happy to go. And they said, are you sure? Really? And I said, yeah. I said, why? He said, well, he's a Democrat. And I'm like, wait a minute. This man is the President of the United States of America. And I am going. And he's coming here to help us. And if you have an issue with that, that's your problem, not mine. But when I got elected to be governor of Florida, I did not get elected in 2006 to be the governor of the Republicans of Florida. And if I win this race this November, I will not be elected to be the governor for the Democrats of Florida. When you get elected governor of Florida, as I learned from a wonderful man named Reuben Askew, you are elected governor of the people of Florida. And so I went down to Fort Myers and enjoyed it. And it was fun to be with the president. The place was jumping. It was incredible. And I remember I met him underneath the convention center. He comes in this huge car they call the Beast. I guess they fly it wherever he flies. And he came in underneath, and I was just kind of standing there. And at any rate, he motions to me to come to the car. So I get in the back seat, and I'm sitting there with him. And he says, well, number one, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Number two, you're going to take a lot of heat for this. And you're going to pay a price for having done this today. And I know that. He said, you're a Republican, I'm a Democrat. So thank you. Number two, would you introduce me? And I said, yeah, sure. I had gotten word, actually, that might happen. And so I had put a few thoughts together to not stumble when I did it. And I said, I'd be more than happy to. He goes, well, why don't we do it like this? He said, they're going to have a podium out there in the convention center where we go to speak. There'll be like this catwalk that walks up to it. And why don't you go first and just say what you want to say, introducing me. And when you're done, I'll come up and do my thing, and that'll be it. Is that all right? I said, sounds great. Short and sweet. So I go up to the podium, and I say, let's have a warm welcome to the president, and good of him to be here, and he's trying to help us, and with all this public service that he can help protect, with money, frankly, that we had sent to Washington, and we'll just get some of it back, for our Florida. And then he comes walking up, and he's kind of jazzed up, and He shakes my hand, and then he pulls me a little closer to him, and we hugged. And that hug became the hug that killed me as a Republican. I don't think that was the president's intent. He's a good, decent man, but it had that effect. I mean, so much so. I don't know if you remember this, but then I ran for the Senate the next year, and my then Republican opponent, Marco Rubio, one of our U.S. senators today, he used that photograph intentionally in much of his literature, and he didn't just use it on the inside letterhead. He used it on the envelope when he sent mail out. Charlie Crist, the Republican governor, hugging the African-American president. And I'm going to say it because it was that way. And it's kind of funny. I mean, fast forward to today, and my mom and dad, who I told you are Republicans, they're getting mail from Rick Scott that has the same photograph of Charlie Crist hugging the African-American president. Funny, right? The last time I think that happened, it's not funny. The last time I think that happened in Florida was when a governor named Leroy Collins was running for the United States Senate, and there was a photograph of him walking in Selma with a man named Dr. Martin Luther King. And he got beat too. But I'm an optimist. It's a new day. And I'm encouraged by the fact that the president got reelected. And won Florida too. Took us a while to count the votes thanks to the suppressor in Tallahassee, but we can change that in about 8 months. And I'm very optimistic, and I'm very grateful that you're here. And I hope that if you buy the book, that you enjoy it. It's a lot about Florida, it's a lot about politics, and it's a lot about hope. And what we can all do together if we're willing to work together, put partisanship aside, and realize that we're all Americans, and here we're all Floridians. So God bless you, and thank you for your time. And I don't know how we want to do this, but I'll go sit in that chair and sign books, I guess, right?
Would you like to take any questions?
Sure. I'm happy to take some questions if you have some. Yeah, please, sir.
Yes, one of the things I liked best about the governorship was your climate change conference.
Let me be clear, that is not scotch. It's Red Bull Light.
It was your climate change conferences in Miami.
Yes, sir.
It signaled not only an interest in the subject, but it also endorsed the business opportunity that renewable energy offers to the state of Florida. And I'm hopeful if you get elected, I hope you're planning to run on a renewable energy platform.
Yes. Thank you. What's your name?
John Van Leer.
John, thank you. Mike, do you have a bumper sticker? I want to show John how committed I am to this. You do? It's very important to me. And those climate change summits I had because I think we got to get off oil. And I think it's real important that for a multitude of reasons. Number one, because it's dirty and it's not good for the planet and it's hurting us. And I remember the BP oil spill, and that was a nightmare, as I'm sure all of you recall. And it really opened my eyes to the problem. Thank you, Mike. But that's our bumper sticker, and you'll notice the sunshine on it, the sun coming up. Well, it's not just because it's pretty. It's because I believe in solar energy. And I think we're the sunshine state, And it just strikes me that we ought to be doing a lot more of renewables. I mean, solar, wind, you name it. I think it's wave, current technology. All those kinds of things, I think. And Florida's the natural launching pad for that kind of stuff. Go ahead, I'm sorry. Yeah, amen. I'm with you. And it just comes up every morning. And it's free. And you don't have to drill into the earth to get it. I mean, it's just so logical to me. It's such a common sense approach. And especially for a place like Florida to be the world leader in it. I met with a gentleman named Elon Musk a couple weeks ago in California. And if you don't know, Mr. Musk is an amazing human being. He's a supporter, God bless him. And he has done some incredible things. I think he invented eBay. He invented PayPal. He invented the Tesla electric car. He invented a company called Solar City, that I talked to him about. And it's one of the largest solar energy companies in North America. And they're doing great. He invented SpaceX. They're launching rockets from Cape Canaveral. They just had another launch, I think, on the 16th. But at any rate, he's just a fascinating man. And when I went out there to meet with him, they were showing me around where they make his rocket engines, in California. And I told the gentleman, he said, in about 5 minutes is your time for your meeting with Elon. And I said, okay. I said, you know what I feel like? I feel like I'm getting ready to meet, Albert Einstein or something. And he said, no, it's better than that. He said, you're getting ready to meet Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, all in one guy. And he said he's one of the most humble, down-to-earth people you'll ever meet. And he was right. I mean, he's great. But the point is, we need to be talking about things that really move the Florida economy forward. And I'm running against a guy who talks about rental car companies. I mean, that's delightful. That's great. But we got to think big. We can do much more space exploration from Cape Canaveral than we're doing today. We can do much more in solar energy than we're doing today. I am told that we're like 18th in the country in the development of solar energy. And it's crazy. New Jersey's doing more than we are. Give me a break. No, shout or slight to New Jersey. The Garden State's all wonderful. But, we're Florida. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, it can create a lot of jobs. It'll be cleaner. It'll help Florida. It'll help tourism. And it's just doing the right thing, doing what God wants. Yeah.
There's a lady in the back row who's had her hand up.
Yes, ma'am. How are you? I'm fine, thank you.
I would like to know if you have a new agenda or a platform for your new for this time that you didn't do the last time. Do you have a new platform?
Yeah,
A
even
different
better.
one?
To do even better.
A different one?
I'm sorry.
If you have a different platform like you did the last time,
Not really.
that was nothing.
It's pretty much the same, which is to look out for you and the middle class.
That's all what we are going to have.
I'm sorry?
That's all what we are going to have.
I wasn't quite done, but if you'll permit me, I'd be happy to answer your question, because I know it's asked sincerely. I think it's important to let people like that have their say. And some people are angry, and that's unfortunate. But I'm hopeful. And what I hope for is a better tomorrow. And I think that we're going to get it. And with your help, I know we will. Yeah.
What's your history with working with both parties? Do you have a history that you've worked with both parties, or?
Yeah, and thank you for asking. And I think it's important. I mean, what is also important, it's important to work with Republicans, Democrats, and independents. I mean, the no party registration is rising very high in Florida and the country, frankly. And, as I said before, we're all Floridians. And the notion that we can't come together to do what's right for all of us is ridiculous. And, party labels are not that important. What's important is your heart and your soul and what you believe. And I haven't changed much at all. I was raised by two great parents, Charlie Sr. and my mother, Nancy. And my dad's 81 years old. He's a family doctor, still practices every day in St. Pete. My mother, Nancy, is the sweetest woman I've ever met in my life. And because of how they raised my three sisters and me, I mean, they taught us and instilled in us that you respect others, that you are decent to other people, that you don't judge them by their party registration or the color of their skin or the language that they speak, and that you try to do unto others and do what's right. And we got to get back to that. I feel that very strongly, and I'm very optimistic that we are, in spite of the questioner. There's more people I know in Florida who are hopeful and optimistic and kind and compassionate and caring. And the best evidence I can present to you is the re-election of President Obama. He did it here in Florida in spite of the voter suppression, in spite of the lies, because people want goodness to keep going forward. Yes, sir.
My name is Michael Rosenberg. This is Rita Schwartz. We're the co-founders of the Pets Trust. We educated the community about the problem with animals shelters are being killed.
Yes.
And 500,000 people voted to raise their property taxes just a little bit so we could stop killing animals. In the state of Florida, we kill 300,000 animals a year, and it costs us $60 million to do that. It's been going on for decades. We're hoping, and the reason we're here is we have to answer to a lot of people. We're hoping you're going to be the animal governor. Yes. How do you feel about that?
Well, I love animals, number one. And, you know, I live in this condominium in St. Petersburg, and, you know, a lot of the residents there have pets. And, you know, whether it's a dog or a cat or a bird, those pets are like a family member. I mean, when I was a kid, we had a dog. Her name was Sandy. And Sandy was precious. She was half black and tan deer hunter and half Labrador retriever. And just a sweet, sweet dog. And so I think, you know, just like they're all creatures of God. So, I mean, I'd be happy to be that. Well, you know, to your point, too, we've unfortunately had a record year of deaths of manatees in Florida this past year. And again, I think that goes back in part to the environment and how this governor has led our state and what's happening with the Caloosahatchee River and the St. Lucie River and the outflows from Lake Okeechobee. And then he has the gall to say and blame it on the President of the United States. You know, I mean, it's just absurd. And I know better because I was your governor. And when I came in as your governor before, the same thing was happening. And we stopped it by appointing good people to the water management districts and saying, stop the discharges. It's not the right thing to do. And my approach was, you know, let's buy the Everglades and restore the natural flow that God put in place from the Kissimmee River down through the lake and on into Florida Bay. And if you have a good filter like that, you don't have to do those kind of discharges. I could go on and on. But, yeah, Herman.
One of the great governors of Florida, Ruben Askew, and there's a lot of parallels, but tomorrow they're having a memorial service in his memory. I know you are, but your relationship with him and how you would describe him as a governor and how you try to follow in his footsteps.
I'll tell you a true story about Governor Askew. Great man, unquestioned integrity and truth and clarity. When I got elected governor last time, I tried to meet with each of the past governors that were still alive, because I just thought that, you know, if you were going into a new job and you could talk to somebody who had done it before, you might benefit from their wisdom, which you do. And so I called Governor Askew, and I thought this would be the easiest meeting to set up because he lived in Tallahassee. And so we were doing our transition, and our transition office was in the Holland building right across from the Capitol on Monroe Street. And Governor Askew said, sure, I'll come and I'll visit with you. And he said, but there's a condition to that. And I said, what's that? He said, well, I will only meet with you if it's just you and me. Just governor to governor, no staff, just the two of us. And I said, of course, that's easy. And so he came over to the Holland building, and we secured just a conference table in a conference room and sat down and spoke for about an hour. And just pearls of wisdom coming out of this guy. It's just great and very kind of him to give of his time. But one thing really stood out that he told me that day before I got sworn in. He said, Charlie, people of Florida elected you. They put their faith and their trust in you with this office. And it's a wonderful office. You can do so many good things. And he said, because you're about to become governor, every single day that you are, people are going to ask you to do things or not do things or support things or veto things. And he said, let me give you this most important piece of advice. When they come to you and ask you to do something, and then they start to say in the middle of the presentation, well, Governor, if you just look at it this way, you can really see how it's okay and the right thing to do. He said, that's when the conversation should end. He said, because those people elected you, and they put their faith and their trust in you. And you should not be bought, and you shouldn't be convinced to do something that you know in your heart already is not right. That's Ruben Askew. So I'm honored to be able to go to his services tomorrow in Tallahassee. Thank you, Herman. Great question. Yes, ma'am.
I
I've been a public high school teacher in Dade County for about 7 years now, and
Thank you for teaching.
as you can imagine, these last few years have been very difficult
It's
for
a
us
nightmare.
as teachers,
Yeah.
as just the fear. And just, I want to know how you feel about this lovely debacle of merit-based pay that we've had hanging over our head.
Well, I vetoed it when I was
know,
out.
and I just want to be sure we're still on the same page.
We're on the same page. And
Okay.
the reason I vetoed it,
Well, there were many reasons, but the straw that really broke the camel's back for me is how that law was going to teach special ed teachers. And the fact that there were going to be evaluations each and every year, and evaluating is fine, but it must be fair. And, you know, I think it was Alex Villalobos and Rudy Garcia, two Republicans, who called me about halfway through the session and said, this bill's getting weird, and it's becoming bad instead of good. Because originally it looked like, well, you know, we're going to talk about proper evaluations and people do better if they're doing well in the classroom, and all that sounded warm and fuzzy and good. Yeah, but they changed it, like they do, like this governor does, and like that party does. And they turned it into something else. That's called fraud. And that shouldn't surprise us coming from this administration. Because you need to remember that ethics matter. And talking about Ruben Askew, integrity matters. I am running against a guy, I've already answered your question, I hope, but I'm running against a guy who, his company under his leadership, when he was the CEO, had to pay the largest fine for fraud, Medicare fraud, in the history of the United States of America. And he's our governor? I can't believe it. I can't believe he won the first time. Yeah, I know you can. Well, in 8 months we can fix it. That's the good news. And it's coming. Coming.
I wanted to ask you
I hope.
about your support of public schools versus charter schools, what your feelings are.
well, you know, I actually co-sponsored the charter school bill.
When it was passed when I was in the legislature. And at the time, they were defined as public schools and couldn't come into existence unless the local school board said it was okay, which I thought was a pretty good idea. I mean, my dad had been on the school board when I was a kid. I'm concerned about what's happened with some charter schools lately. We're starting to read about them a good bit in the media. And I think there were 3 the other day in Broward that were shut down or being looked at or something. So I'm watchful, I guess. I'm a huge fan of public education. Huge fan. I mean, as I told you, I went to public school. I graduated from a state university, Florida State University. I love them all, though, but we've had a heck of a year, Andy, and thanks to your leadership. Appreciate it very much. But I think I told you I have 3 sisters. 2 of them were public school teachers. You know, and as I said, my dad was on the school board. Education is the most important civil right we have. And it's led America to great places. And will continue to do so, I believe, and I hope. And so you'll not find a better advocate for public schools than Charlie Crist. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'd like to follow up on that question. We're teachers, and we're very
Thank you.
concerned about the toxic atmosphere that has prevailed in the past few years. I'd like to know, I know as the governor of everyone in Florida, and also you have to support school choice. But do you see a place for more accountability for charter schools?
Do I see a place for more accountability for charter schools?
Yeah.
Accountability is never a bad idea so long as it's done fairly. So yeah, I think that's happening. But I think it has to happen more and better. We certainly have accountability to our public schools. Why should anybody be excluded from that?
But they don't have the same standards to live up to as the
Today.
public school today.
We're talking about tomorrow. We're talking about November 4th. Aren't we? Is that what we're talking about?
I hope so. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
Miami Herald has been writing about the 471 children who have died because of the lack of
Correct.
care with the Department of Children and Families. And I was wondering what you see as the solution within the Department of Children and Families to safeguard Florida's children.
Well, you know, I think it starts with
Appropriate funding. Not that funding solves every problem under the sun, but it's clear to me that, you know, let me start off by saying it's a horrific tragedy. and our hearts go out to those children and the family members of those children. And one lost life is awful. Having said that, I think there are ways that you can try to improve the Department of Children and Families. One of the approaches I took as a then Republican governor was appointed Bob Butterworth, a Democratic Attorney General, former Attorney General, to run it. And he's extraordinary. And I knew he would care about children, and he absolutely did. And then George Sheldon, I appointed him to follow him, and he did an extraordinary job under the most difficult of circumstances. Because again, remember, during my first term, we had the worst economic meltdown in the history of America since the Great Depression itself. And so we had to work within limited revenue. And we were challenged by that, being straight up. But now we have the highest budget in the history of Florida, $74+ billion. And last year they tried to cut it. And this governor tried to cut DCF's funding, is what I'm talking about. Now, to me, that's unconscionable when you're swimming in money. I mean, you almost have to do some of it when you have, such declining revenue that we had to face. But this administration and this legislature have record revenue. And they were still cutting it, hundreds, $200 million. And then he has the gall to say, I'm going to try to increase it by 30 or 31 million. Really? That's it? I mean, it's inexcusable. It's wrong. And I think Senator Sobel, I should say, is introducing legislation to address some of these things. I mean, we don't pay the people enough who do the investigations and the hard work. And I want to give a shout out to Carol Marvin Miller for her great piece. I mean, it's extraordinary. She ought to win a Pulitzer Prize for it. And transparency is important. The numbers of these poor children who are no longer with us are in somewhat dispute, because we're not sure how they're counting them and assessing them in this administration in Tallahassee. That's amazing to me. I remember one time early in my first year as governor, Secretary Butterworth called me, Herman, and he said, we've got a difficult situation we're dealing with over here. We just found out about what do you want us to do with it? I said, call a press conference and talk about it. The only way that we can solve problems is to say we have problems and we need to fix them. And so, and he did it, God bless him. He was a good man. Yes, ma'am.
Lost last week. Are you concerned about it? Is it predictive of where the state of Florida is? Alex Singh's lost.
Oh, Alex Singh's lost. Am I concerned about it? Yeah.
I'm disappointed about it.
Where the state of Florida is, you think?
No, I don't. I have a friend that did a great column the other day, and I think he's right. That was a district that has very little minorities at all. I mean, I live in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I live south of Central Avenue, which is the dividing line for that district, because most minorities in St. Petersburg live south of Central Avenue, or at least a lot do, and they were cleansed out of that district and couldn't vote for Alex Singh, like I couldn't. I mean, I'm happy with Kathy Castor. She's a great member of Congress, and she's my congresswoman. But there's a huge difference, I think, between that district and Florida as a whole. Yeah, so I would be hopeful, and I would not be discouraged by the outcome of that race, except I think it would have been great to have Alex in Congress.
Yes.
You mentioned President Obama's re-election and winning Florida, and those of us who worked at the ground level, really at the ground level, know that the only thing that trumps money is the ground game. People on the ground working really hard.
Chairwoman is correct in implying.
Florida has, as many states do, but Florida, I think, is very high in this, has a huge drop-off in voting in non-presidential elections. Particularly in...
Keeps me awake at night.
Yes, as well it should, because it's a big, big issue. And it's across all ethnicities. It's particularly high in the Latino community, but also in the African American community as well. Obviously, keeping you awake at night is good because you're thinking of it. Are you?
My hair didn't get white by accident.
Yeah, got you.
Or yours, I
Mine
assume.
either.
Yeah.
I'm not asking for your strategy, but how are you thinking about it, just in terms of it's a big mountain to climb?
It is. It is. There's no question
about it. And you know, again, what the president's campaign did was extraordinary in Florida, and they hired a gazillion people. And we're not going to have the resources, probably, unless something miraculous happens, you know, to do and replicate that. But we're going to do the very best we can to get as close to it as possible, because it's extraordinarily important to make sure people get out. And the ground game is the very best possible, and field is a focus for us. And I would like to disclose a conversation I had with him about that last week, but I don't think I'm at liberty to yet. So I'll just tell you that we're focused on it. And we will have offices around the state and probably open, well, we have one in St. Petersburg, but probably open the first one in Miami-Dade County of a field office, and soon. Yes, sir.
You mentioned before that people are angry.
Some are.
Yeah, some from the Cuban American community. And a few weeks ago, you said in Bill Manor that you were maybe pro the talks again to open the relationship between the United States and Cuba and end the embargo. How is your position in that topic, and how do you think the South Florida community from Cuban America is going to react to that?
I think fine.
You know, and people have a right to their opinion, and I respect that. My humble opinion is that we've had this embargo in place for over 50 years, and it hasn't worked. The regime is still there. And I know that there are people suffering on the island, and that breaks my heart. I'm a compassionate, empathetic man. And when I see that in a place that's so close to our country and our Florida particularly, it seems to me, you know, that we have some kind of a duty to do something about it. And so that's why I answered Mr. Maher straight up. He's the first person who asked me how I felt about it, and I said I think we need to get rid of the embargo because people are suffering and it hasn't worked, and I think it's important to try to help them, and that's just how I feel. We're going to sign some books at some point, I'm sure. Go ahead.
Quick comment. One, thanks for having the courage to leave the party and writing this book. I think that takes a lot of courage, and I wanted to thank you.
You have no idea. No, if I might, just for a moment, and remember the second part of what you were going to say.
People, some people, put it in a light that they want to put it in. And that it's, you know, you're doing it because, you know, you want to have another opportunity. I hadn't thought about running for governor. I have a great life. You know, I'm making a little money for the first time in my life. More than a little. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I get to spend a lot of time with my wife, and that's a great joy. But Rick Scott broke my heart by what he did to teachers, by what he's done to the environment, by his unethical behavior, you know, in his record before he was governor, and, you know, what's happened to the economy. I know we could be doing so much more. And so I couldn't sit by and watch that happen again. And you know, and if he gets reelected, Andy and Herman know this very well, if he gets reelected, he'll appoint, I think it's 4 members of the Florida Supreme Court. Breaking news, there's only 7. You know, I went to FSU, but I know that's a majority. And that's not just important to lawyers, my friends. It's important to gays. It's important to women. It's important to minorities and the environment and public education. Because ultimately, a lot of decisions end up before those members of the Florida Supreme Court. And so I couldn't sit by and just let that happen. And anyway, go ahead and finish. I'm sorry.
Second half of your question, then we'll sign some books.
Sure. The second thing I was going to say is
yes, ma'am.
You mentioned Everglades restoration. You mentioned the manatee. I applaud your efforts there, and I want you to be able to wear a green tie in support of the environment. So That's it. I just wanted to comment on thank you for being the green governor you were, and we've rolled back 30 years since you've been gone, so we need you back.
Well, thank you. We need each other.
Bless you. Thanks.